prepared for the exam well. I do want to mention again...
At the intersection of ethnomusicology and Korea's traditional music, Gugak, is Hilary FINCHUM-SUNG, who's currently teaching ethnomusicology at Seoul National University. Born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, she fell in love with Gugak in graduate school and has been walking the path as an educator ever since, teaching and conducting field research to properly understand its true nature.
Korean music is really about natural qualities. It's about breathing, and it's about earth and wood and silk and stone. Korean music, that's what it's about.
From hearing stories like her first encounter with Gugak to the Haegeum she now knows how to play, tune into Heart to Heart to find out. Today we are joined with Ms. Hilary FINCHUM-SUNG, the Associate Professor of Theory and Ethnomusicology, specializing in Gugak, Korean traditional music at Seoul National University. Hello and welcome to Heart to Heart.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Would you like to say hello to our viewers that are watching right now?
Yes, I would. I'll say hello. Hi, my name is Hilary Vanessa FINCHUM-SUNG. I am an ethnomusicologist and a specialist in Korean music theory and performance, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk with our beautiful host and with you all today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you once again for the wonderful intro. So I am aware that you have lived in Korea. You've been in Korea for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yes.
Yes.
I've actually been living here for 9 years now, a little over 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent, before that time, I spent some time in Korea in the 90s, spent a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Spent time in and out before actually making the decision to come here and live. So that's since 2009.
Yes, 2009. So
Yeah.
this was when you were appointed as a professor in 2009 at SNU, Seoul National University. And since then, you've not only been teaching students, giving lectures and holding classes, but you've also published 29 research papers or journals, and still counting.
Yeah, it grows.
Many more. And you have engaged in a number of field research projects. So I'd like to ask about the types of field research projects you've done so far. What kind of research projects do you work on?
Well, some of them are long and some of them are relatively focused on like one particular moment of time, and then I move on to other things. So they kind of overlap. More recently, I've been doing research on Chindo, and that has been going on now, maybe 5 or 6 years. It started with a trip to Chindo, and just because I had never been, and I'd always heard of Chindo as being kind of this important place for Gugak, especially in contemporary Korea. And I went and I just fell in love, and it grew from there, and I met people, and initially people were sort of like, who are you? Why are you here? And it took me about a year, to find my people who were helpful and who became my friends and my teachers, and yeah, so my research there focuses primarily on women and women's role in sustainability of traditional music practice, because women are really important in that regard. I found it to be really good. It allowed me to get away. It allowed me to learn new things, and it also allowed me to engage with older people. A lot of my research focuses on, or had focused on, younger people and younger musicians or middle-aged musicians, and I found it really intimidating initially to go up to somebody who's like 80 years old and try to talk to them. Naturally, it was pretty awkward initially, and then they have this strong accent, in Chola, Chola-Namdo. And I didn't, I couldn't understand what people were saying initially, so I brought a student with me who's a pansori. She was a major, and she could understand the Chola-do accent, and so she helped. She was sort of the interlocutor. She would translate into Seoul. She would translate into Seoul Korean, and then I'd be like, oh. And initially I went with her, and I became quite dependent on her, but after about a year, I started going by myself. And actually, initially I was terrified. I was like, what if I don't understand what they're saying? And I didn't sometimes, but then they were very patient. A lot of these older women really have a passion for what it is that they do, and the older men as well. And they really want you to understand, and they don't mind explaining things over again, you know, even though I ask stupid questions, which often I do. They're very patient, and it was good for me to go by myself and kind of build those relationships without somebody in between.
Yes.
So yeah, for me, it allows me to appreciate older people and how they've lived in their hard lives, and a lot of those people have had really hard lives, but they have such a beautiful soul, you know, and the music they make is just gorgeous. So for me, I always do this when I think about them. I can't talk. It's crazy. But for me, it's just amazing how out of a hard life, out of a hard life, something of great beauty can emerge. And I appreciate them for that.
Yeah.
그래 안 돼요. 잘 뱉단게.
그러면 외국인이 또 참가할 사람이 또 이렇게 육자배기 하는 이도 있는가?
모르겠어요.
We did briefly mention that you are the first international or foreign professor to teach Gugak at Seoul National University. Do you teach in Korean only, or do you also teach in English?
That's a good. Well, the graduate classes are in Korean, and I kind of feel sorry for my students, but I usually go at the beginning of the semester, can we do this in English? And they're like, and I say, okay, well, we can do it in Korean. And they're all nodding their heads like, yes, please. So we do it in Korean. The major classes depend. If my introduction to Korean music class only has Korean students in it or 국악과 students in it, then I do a heavy mix of English and Korean. But I do provide the students PowerPoints in Korean and English, so it allows them to kind of better access the materials. The general elective classes are, of course, in English.
Now we're talking about your students, and actually after hearing that you'd be joining us on the show today, some of your students have sent in questions for you.
Oh my gosh. How did you reach my students?
Let's take a look at the screen here. We'll have some questions popping up. So let's take a look at the first one.
안녕하세요. 교수님이 한국어를 정말 잘하는데 어떻게 배웠습니까?
That's a good question. I didn't know he could speak Korean, so this is great. Yeah,
so that's one of your students.
He's in my introduction to ethnomusicology class this semester. He's very attentive, and he actually has nothing to do with music, but he's interested in learning about ethnomusicology, so he's in my class. And okay, so to answer your question.
Sorry to cut you off, but would it be okay if I asked you to answer the question in Korean?
Oh, okay.
Because we know that you give lectures and
I can do it, but
Korean,
you know, it could be painful.
Just a brief.
Should I go ahead and start? 한국어 어떻게 배웠냐 물어봤는데 그냥 한순간에서 배우는 게 아니라 오랫동안 해서 점점 더 좋아지고 있는데 처음에 어떻게 배웠냐면 대학원생 때 한국어 수업했어요. 근데 정말 힘든 게 그 수업 듣는 학생들 중에서 거의 다 한 90%, 95% 다 교포들이었어요. 그래서 이미 한국어 알아듣고 말로 표현할 수 있었는데 저 빼고 너무 힘들었어요. 근데 대학원에서 3년 동안 배웠다가 한국 처음 왔을 때는 연세어학당에서 1년에 한 9개월 거기서 배웠고 근데 사실은 그것보다 책 보고 수업 듣는 것보다 그냥 여기서 생활하면서 점점 더 누리지고 있는 것 같고요. 그래서 그냥 여기 있는 게 중요하다고 생각해요.
네.
예.
저도 그렇게 생각을 합니다.
네.
교수님, 우리 계속해서 한국어로 할까요?
no. 영어로 제일 편합니다. 죄송합니다.
Alright, yes, we have another question from another student.
힐러리 선생님 수업을 들었을 때 항상 열정 넘치시게 수업을 해주셨는데 그 선생님만의 그런 비결이 있으신가요?
So she's mentioned that you're so full of passion every single time. So what's your secret?
I don't know. I think I'm just really excited to teach. I love teaching. And I like the student she's always very attentive and she's always concentrating so hard in class, and I really appreciate that. I can see that she's trying to understand what it is that we're covering. So with students like that, it gives me energy. When you walk into a classroom, if you walk into any place and people are like, oh my God, and they're not really interested in what it is that you're doing, then it sort of robs you of energy. When you walk into the classroom and you have a student like this who's like, their eyes are sparkling and they're really interested in what you're trying to say, and to me, that's actually the key. That gives me energy, and it makes me want to teach better. It makes me want to do a better job every day. So it's always my goal to improve. I love what I do, and that's important.
Okay. And here is our final question.
핀첨성 선생님 수업 듣는 학생인데요. 선생님 수업에서 학점을 잘 받을 수 있는 팁이 궁금합니다.
So how can you get better grades in your class?
Study. 공부하세요. 그냥.
그리고 관심을 가지세요. 관심을 갖고
관심 있으면 좋죠. 근데 it's important to do the readings, to come to class. He's doing a great job so far. He's always paying attention. Don't do your handphone in class. Paying attention and just being there and asking questions when you're not sure you understand. That's actually the key. People always think, I have to be smart to do well in school, or I have to, you don't actually. The better students are the students that pay attention and try. So that's the key. There's no magic. Sorry. There's no magic.
No magic. That's reality. Just study hard. And I remember as, a middle school student or even elementary, I remember teachers saying there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you're curious about anything, if you don't understand anything, just raise your hand and ask. That's like the number one way of, maybe not number one, but one of the ways to actually learn.
Yeah, no, I always tell the students, I say there's no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the question that's not asked. And for me, I like questions because I'm thinking, if somebody asks a question about something I just said and it's obvious they didn't understand what I said, it's because I didn't do a good enough job, a good enough job explaining what it is that I'm trying to communicate. So it actually helps me, and I like questions because it also shows me that students are paying attention.
Hilary FINCHUM-SUNG became the first foreign professor to teach Korean traditional music at Seoul National University. We took a look into her daily life.
Right? So it's
Her day is usually filled with teaching students. Thanks to her passionate lectures, the students concentrate hard and gain a lot from her classes. What is she doing now? She's playing one of Korea's traditional instruments, the Haegeum. She said she learned how to play it to get a better understanding of Gugak. Shall we enjoy it for a moment?
Hilary is a wonderful colleague to have. I always appreciate her cheerful personality and her sharp insights about life and soul as an international scholar. I'm also often impressed with how dedicated she is to supporting her students and her colleagues. So Hilary is smart, talented, hardworking, beautiful. I'm really glad you're making this program about her.
힐러리 핀첨성 선생님께서는 한국 음악 학자로서 우리 한국의 전통음악에 대한 많은 지식을 가지고 계시고 또 그것을 한국에 있는 외국인들 또는 해외에 있는 많은 음악 전문가들 그리고 대중들에게 알리는 데 앞장서고 계십니다. 가장 인상적이었던 거는 누가 이렇게 하라고 시킨 것도 아닌데 선생님께서 우리 서울대학교 음대 유학 오는 외국인 학생들을 위해서 먼저 이렇게 뭐 가이드북이라든지 아니면 상담을 하시든지 그렇게 자발적으로 그렇게 봉사하는 그런 일들을 하시는 거를 보고 정말 제가 많이 놀랐고 그리고 정말 존경할 만한 분이라고 생각을 했어요. 그래서 참 동료 교수로서 아주 좋다고 저는 생각을 하고요.
Now, you did mention that you're originally from Nashville, Tennessee, which is home to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. So I'd like to ask you, what made you want to start studying Korean traditional music? I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time. So what made you want to initially start studying Gugak or Korean traditional music, and what kept you going?
For me too, you know, it's kind of unusual. I mean, I grew up in Nashville. Growing up in Tennessee, we didn't even have Korean history or anything related to Korea in our curriculum. So I really didn't know anything about Korea throughout high school and college. And when I entered the ethnomusicology program in Indiana, I just really wanted to study music, but also society. So I was really interested in exploring those two interests. And I didn't go in going, I want to do Korea, because Korea wasn't even on my mental map. But I was interested in, at one point in time, shaman ritual music and its effect on the mind. And so some students and I were doing this research project in a computer lab, and we were taking samples from Tuvan, you know, shaman music and Manchurian and Native American or indigenous peoples, you know, shaman music, and running it through and analyzing it. And I was sitting down with Roger Janelli, who is a folklorist specializing in Korea, and he was a professor there at that time. He's now retired. And he said, you know, if you're interested in shamanism, why don't you take a look at Korean shamanism? And I was like, oh, there's shamanism in Korea? He said, yes, there is. And so he pointed me towards some books, and I wanted to hear the music, but at that time, and this is going to shock a lot of you guys, there was no YouTube, you know, email was a new freaking thing. You know, MP3s didn't really exist. They were probably in the works, but I didn't know about them. So I wanted to go to the library, and there were no recordings, so I went to a local record store. And it was weird, because Indiana University is in the middle of a cornfield, literally. It's in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. So I go into the record store, and I'm like, do you have any Korean music? And he was like, actually, we do. So he brought out 3 CDs. One was like from court music. It was a compilation. One was pansori, which is the narrative storytelling tradition. And the other was ritual music from the Southwest of Korea. And I said, I'll take them all 3. So I bought all 3. And because I was interested in shamanism, I went ahead. That was the first one I listened to. And the sounds that came out to me were just amazing. They were so different from what I had expected. I kind of just sort of assumed that Korea would be sort of similar culturally and aesthetically to Japan, maybe, or if not that, China. And I didn't realize how different it would be. And the sounds themselves were so raw. They sounded as if the instruments were breathing. And I could sense that what was happening was quite improvisational. I mean, I grew up playing music, and we did jam sessions in college, and I loved to improvise. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I just loved that spontaneity of the sounds and the rawness. It was kind of gritty sounding, and I liked it. And I wanted to, I'd always liked that when I played the violin, I would go as low as I could on the G string, and sometimes tune it lower to get that kind of sounds. And I always really liked that. And there was that element to Korean traditional music, that timbre, that tone color that emerged, and I was just intrigued, and I just listened to it for hours that night, and I went to school the next day, and I met with my advisor, who was desperately trying to get me to find something that I wanted to focus on for my MA thesis, and I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I'd never heard this before. And she was like, okay, next semester, I'm going to suggest that you learn Korean. And I was like, okay. You know, I was sort of, I was one of those students that professors were kind of probably having meetings about, why hasn't Hilary chosen her focus yet? What's she going to do her MA thesis on, And she suggested it, and I kind of went with it, and it actually was a good choice.
Wow.
It was really hard. I think choosing to do Korean music at the age of 25, it was pretty late, and it was really hard and really stressful, and but I think overall, the trajectory into the present, it was a good choice, and yeah.
Now, I heard that this kind of music changed your life, Shinawi. So what was it about it that was so amazing? I don't know, what gave you such a strong impression?
Well, that was the music that I first heard. When I went to the record store, in Bloomington, Indiana, that was, Shinawi is a kind of shaman ritual music. There are Shinawi types from different parts of Korea, but perhaps the most famous and recognizable is the kind from the southwestern part of the country, which starts, that's typically how it begins, and then, people kind of start on the same pitch, and then they kind of gradually fall apart. So this music is kind of complicated because it's improvisatory in the ritual context. So essentially, it's quite complicated, and to do it well, you really have to be an accomplished musician.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the sound that I heard that day, in Indiana, that was Shinawi, and it literally changed my life. It directed me towards Korean music. I started learning Korean music. I was taking classes in Korean history and sociology and literature, and moving on, and here I am today. So if I had never heard that, if I had never been engaged in that project, I wouldn't probably be here today.
Thanks to Shinawi.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am very thankful. Yeah.
And from your journey that started in 1997, is that right, until this day today, you've been exposed to various forms of Korean traditional music. So in your opinion, what would you say is the greatest feature or characteristic of Korean music?
For me, personally, the greatest feature, some people will say rhythm. I like the idea of tone color. That's what really drew me initially when I heard that recording was, it wasn't super silky smooth, and it wasn't clean. You know what I'm saying? It kind of had a rawness to it.
Yes.
And that to me was just the coolest thing ever, and that's what really drew my attention. And for me, it's umsek, it's tone color, timbre, the quality of sound of the instruments, which again celebrates kind of a natural earthiness that I really love, and that to me is iconically what Korean music is all about.
And we're down to our final question. I'd like to ask you about your goals. Do you have any goals for this particular year?
Well, there are a lot of personal goals, yes. One of my goals is to complete the manuscript for my book and to get that out. So it's, one of the things as a scholar, it's kind of the rite of passage, I guess, for scholars is to produce a book. And mine's been long in coming, but it traces actually my experience with Gugak for the past 20 years and looks at different areas like commercialization and marketing and also new composition. So it's quite complex and it needs to be good. So I've been working on it for quite some time. My goal is to push send, and send it to the publisher. So that is one big goal. Yeah.
I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
I was able to learn about Korean music, and not only Korean music, but I was able to feel your passion, your love for Korea and the work that you do, as you've mentioned. Even one of your students said you're so passionate. So I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity, and we hope that you eventually press that send button.
Me too. Send some vibes my way.
And that you continue to spread the beauty of Korean music, Gugak, to many more students that you'll be meeting in the future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really have enjoyed myself. It's very nice to meet you, and I'm delighted to have been your guest for today. Thank you.
Thank you. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.